Good evening and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny panel for Environment, Communities and Partnerships on Thursday, the 6th of March 2025. Starting with the agenda, we'll work with the apologies. Becky.
So we have apologies from Councillors Criswell and Mocknell.
Thank you. Moving on with the minutes. Is everyone happy with the minutes from last month? We've got an agreement there. Thank you. So moving on to members' interests. Has anyone got any interest to declare on the agenda items? Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thanks. Just in relation to agenda item 6, I am the local member.
Yeah, thank you. Any other interest to declare? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 3, the Overview and Scrutiny Working Programme. Everyone's had a look at it. Anyone want to say anything or add anything about it? And moving on to the discussions, we've had quite lengthy discussions. I think we can probably move on from that as well, and where we're moving forwards. Is everyone happy for me to do that? Yeah. So just a quick update. Claire, have you got, Councillor Tevlin, have you got an update on the Disabled Facilities Grants Working Group?
Yes. So me and Councillor Taylor and those councillors will also be briefed, also part of the working group. So we met last week and Officer Claudia Deeth gave us a full report and we are currently the advice would be to go to Claudia for the full debrief of the report, but looking to carry on and getting more investment and funding for disabled facilities for Huntingdonshire, particularly working with our wider partners, but the focus being with Huntingdon. And again, I'd refer to Claudia, who has the full report on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councillor Tevlin. So moving on to agenda item 4, garden waste incentive schemes. We've got Andy who's going and Councillor Taylor who's going to give us a brief introduction.
Thank you, Chair. So the garden waste incentive schemes were introduced in April 2024 as part of the garden waste subscription service changes approved by Cabinet. It was developed with community input. 5 schemes were implemented, and after the first year, 4 schemes have shown good value and operational efficiency. However, one of the schemes has proven expensive to deliver and operationally challenging. This report that you've hopefully read updates Cabinet on the scheme's performance and seeks approval to continue cost-effective initiatives, or to discontinue or modify the underperforming ones, with the main goal of optimising the schemes, alignment with our corporate priority of delivering high quality, cost effective services while supporting community garden waste management. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Andy, did you have anything you wanted to add? So opening up to the panel, has anyone got any questions for Councillor Taylor? Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. It's really interesting, and I can't claim any credit for this, but I was very pleased to see the north of the district outshone the rest of the district in terms of recycling garden waste, particularly my own village of Stilton. And I'm not saying this just because it's Stilton, just because it's the north of the district and furthest away from some of the sites. Is there any way we can re-look at those sites, those collection points that are performing particularly well? You know, Yaxley, Stilton, and Sawtry are so far outperforming the rest of the district. Is there something we can do to put resources into making them work, even if the rest of the district aren't making it work? Thank you, Chair.
First of all, I just want to give a bit of a shout out to the waste management team who's done an absolute sterling job. This was a brand new, quite a maiden project, things that we hadn't really any experience in. Louise and the team have done a fantastic job in getting this up and flying in the first place. When I talk about complexities, we get into the point where throughout the first season, there were 3 occasions when we physically couldn't staff because it's run on a weekend, it's running overtime, people's life-work balance. It's an absolute juggling act to try and get people in to fill all those slots. To move this into another year, I simply can't guarantee, or the service can't guarantee, that we'd be able to deliver that service with the manpower or the staffing to the consistency and the standard that we would expect it to be delivered. So operationally, it's incredibly difficult to consistently deliver. So that's the first point. I think the second point as well, when you look at the numbers, even though they are really impressive and they are really encouraging to see the numbers, I think the highest yield we got across all three sites was around about 8 tonne in the peak of the growing season. And just to put that into context, the 3 vehicles out there had the capacity for around about 33 tonnes of material. So it sounds like a lot, but the resource that we're actually committing to this is it's a bit like a sledgehammer trying to crack a walnut, to be fair. It's very complex, and it isn't just the crews. The other aspect that we often forget about is the workshop stuff that we need to have on call. So when the guys turn up and a bulb doesn't work on a Saturday morning, we need to have somebody there to correct that and fix that. So it's got lots of other implications. It isn't just on drivers and people turning up on site. So there's other people across the organisation where we need to also consider from a resource perspective. So the quick answer is, I can't guarantee that we can physically deliver that, never mind anything else.
I'm really reluctant to accept what you're saying, Andy, but I think I have to. It's such a shame. I remember when I raised this at full council, saying that the social media traffic was so positive on this, and I know we can't make, and I said before as well, we can't make decisions as councillors on social media traffic. We have to look at the facts and figures. And as impressive as those figures are, I reluctantly have to agree that we can't, as a district, subsidise it. It's a real shame. But
I think the other thing I'd like to come back on that is, one of the other things that we are suggesting, though, is the 10 community bins for every town and parish council, again, which is accessible. Every single week of the year, we'll be putting those on the main rounds, which from an operational perspective can be absorbed a lot more easily and a lot more efficiently than trying to get people to work weekends and work overtime, which is effectively what it is. We think that's probably a fairer balance of letting people still access it. So I appreciate that some people will be disappointed in it, and it can be quite disappointing for some of the residents. However, we are offering alternatives to try and make sure that people continue to manage their waste from the gardens.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I echo Tim's comments. It's a shame to lose it, but operationally it makes no financial sense. And I like the fact that we're going to offer parish councils these potentially up to 10 bins, presumably. Obviously, to date, we have been offering that service before now, and obviously we have only had a uptake of 8 parish councils, which I personally thought was quite disappointing. I know personally at Brampton, I've been pushing it, and I don't think they were willing to take it on. Have we had any feedback from town and parish councils regarding? I know it mentions in the report the responsibility for the bins and contamination and what have you. Have we had any other sort of feedback from them? Have we requested all parish councils and requested feedback on that?
I think the first thing to remember is initially we didn't offer it to all town and parish councils. It was only the areas that weren't covered by the Saturday freighter service. So if you had the Saturday freighter service, then that was slightly different. But if you were really outlying and you couldn't get access to any of it, then you offered the free bin. So it wasn't really everybody to start with. So this is now everybody. But you're right. contamination's been a responsibility for the bins. What happens when they get contaminated? Because inevitably they will. What I will say from the parish councils that have taken up the offer, we haven't had any issues at all. We haven't had any issues that we wouldn't deal with in a standard week-to-week waste collection operation. So there hasn't been any like sort of show-stopping issues. And again, what I will say, and I've kind of said this a couple of times now, is we always take a really pragmatic approach, and we want to work with the town and parish councils. So yeah, we've got policies about contamination and rejection, but we're here to work with people, not to say, well, this is policy and now you've got to sort of. That's not really what we or the service or the organisation is about. Really, it's about getting the right solution in the right place.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. Regarding the community bins, one of my villages, Broughton, has had that. It's a small village. They meet every other month for full council, parish council meetings, and they've really embraced the 10 bins, and they've got a councillor who manages it, and they book in and go and collect the bins and take them home and then bring them back. So that's really working very well. But like I say, Broughton is a small village, so it's not too far to walk to get the bins and everything. But it's being managed and it's being used, and the feedback has been fantastic with it. So that it does work. And I like the thing about the bins allocated for land management as well, because I know some of the villages are, residents are clearing up small strips near homes and things. So I think that is a good call as well. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. That's nice. It's nice to get some positive feedback, to be fair. And again, just to reiterate, the door's open. We are more than happy to have conversations and ongoing conversations with any town or parish council in the area. If they're really interested, literally get in contact and we'll start working through that, whatever that might look like.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Looking at the figures, you're looking at, you've got to remember this is over 6 months. So you're looking at 550 odd, which is the most. But that is over 6 months. And some of those are actually the same residents. They're not necessarily individual residents. But going back to the 10 bins, and that's really great to hear, Councillor Lowe, that the village is working well. And absolutely take your point on, it's a small village and we do have bigger villages, but there isn't, and I'm going to turn to Andy here before I'm going to put him on the spot. I don't think there's any reason why we can't. So we've got 10 bins. The parish might want 10 bins. Could we split those 10 bins, 5 one side of the village and 5 the other side, and the crew be able to still pick them up to give access to the village?
What we'll need is we'll need a designated area where we can collect the bins from. What we can't do is we've just got to be very mindful when we start splitting, is that we're not starting to add more and more complexity into a quite complex system anyway. So again, what we'll do is we'll work on a one-by-one basis with the town and parish councils to look at the best solution for the town and parish council and for the operation, so we can get it delivered together.
If I may, Chair, as well, what you've got to see that the 10 bin offers much more flexibility for your residents, because they can use that pretty much any time of the day, whereas the freighters, once a month, they were able to access that. So, it's so much more flexible if a town or parish can take these 10 bins on. It gives much more flexibility to residents.
Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And Andy, thanks very much for all your hard work. I know you put a lot of time and effort. I guess I just want to make a couple of comments, really. The first is, I am disappointed that we're losing the freighter. I was only asked this week whilst walking my dog when it was going to start again. So there is a need for it, but I understand the business implications of not supplying it. I totally get that. But there is a perception, and I have to say this, in the northwest part of the county, the district, is that, with Peterborough, and it's a question I brought at full council, with the impact of Peterborough's decision on waste, and now this decision, there feels that there's becoming a distance to, for waste collection within the part of the ward that I represent and Councillor Alburn. So I just want to make you aware of that, really, because it's important to understand how the public feel about this. I also share the concerns about, the 8 parishes that have taken up on the community bin collection. I know Chesterton have got a really keen individual who's making sure the bins are got the right stuff in, and which is working well. But that is dependent on key individuals within key communities that are able to provide that. And I think it's important. My experience is there's a concern about the commitment, who takes on that responsibility, and some parishes are that small they haven't got the areas, the space to store 10 bins in some communities. So maybe we need to work around that, really. But yeah, I understand the business implications, but we still need to work a lot with our parish councils, really, to reassure the public, so to speak, really. But no recommendations, just comments and observations, really.
Councillor Alburn.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on one of the points about the size of the villages, it's interesting, of those 3 villages, where the star villages, Yaxley and Sawtry, are 2 of the biggest villages in the district. And Stilton, whilst not one of the biggest, it's certainly stretched out along the old Great North Road. And the collection site was at the southern end of the village. So I like the idea that we're flexible enough and want to talk to parishes, and we'll listen to alternatives. I think that's a good idea. I go back to something that was said at a meeting some years ago, an informal meeting up in Yaxley, where the parish clerk said she felt there was the perception was that the villages were being done to by the district rather than working with. And I think that's changed a lot. And I think keeping that communication going will improve that. Just on the recommendation, Chair, one comment. I don't disagree with it, but and it's no reflection on the head of service or the portfolio holder, but I don't want to give carte blanche to any officer or portfolio holder to make decisions without them being scrutinised. So just on the recommendation on page 31, I think it's important, as our role as a panel, that we do we're updated on some of the decisions that are made on this area. So sort of a slight amendment to the recommendation that is that full scrutiny is written into that we get a chance to look at some of the decisions that have been made, even if it's in retrospect, and that we can analyse them.
Okay. Can I just clarify? You'd like to retrospectively look at. I just wanted to clarify what you're asking for is to retrospectively look at that recommendation.
Sorry, no. One of the the recommendation is to give the corporate director and the portfolio holder the ability to make decisions and changes, continue and discontinue. So if that comes to either we pre-scrutinise a decision, or we look at a decision that's been made in retrospect and see how it's panning out, and see if we can make any recommendations, suggestions, how that might be changed or improved, or to get that feedback as part of the scrutiny process, I think it's important for our panel.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
So can I just clarify, Councillor Alban, that you're proposing to add an additional recommendation that you would like to have sight of decisions that have been or will be made by either the officer or the executive councillor in line with the recommendations in the report. Is that correct?
I think that sums it up pretty much. Yeah, thank you very much.
Seconder for that. Councillor Shaw? And could we have a vote for those in favour? 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's quite straightforward. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this paper? Councillor Lowe?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the north of the district, is there anything like a commercial bin that could be used? You know, because they're obviously much larger, and then you probably only need to have a code or something that you can give to people to go when they can and to put the green waste in. I'm just thinking out loud.
It's a good suggestion. The problem that you've got is garden waste's really heavy. So if you've got an 1100 bin full of garden waste, the bin lift, you'll only lift 500 kilos. You literally physically won't be able to pick it up. So that's the problem with larger bins. Yeah, absolutely great. But the bin lifts won't do it.
Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. Just want to pick up on the point that Councillor Bywater made regarding parishes not having enough room maybe to put 10 bins. So this proposal is up to 10 bins. So if they had room for 1 or 2, then you know that is something that is available to them as well. They don't have to have the full maximum 10 bins if it works for 2 or 3 bins within the village. And it's something they could trial, maybe start with a certain amount and then go up and down as they see fit.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. I understand that. I guess is how do we incentivise those parish councils to buy into what we're trying to do, really? I think because at the end of the day, it's down to key individuals. You know, each parish council will have a person who's a bin monitor, so to speak, you know, or bin influencer or whatever you want to call it. But I think it's just how we incentivise them to buy into this, really.
Anybody else with any comments or questions? Councillor Shaw?
I know you said it's going to be a bit of a two-way street regarding asking parishes if they want to provide this service. Would we request any feedback? So if, for example, we offered 10 parishes these bins and only 5 took it up, will we then request some feedback as to why they maybe didn't accept that offer, so we could maybe find some middle ground to accommodate their needs, perhaps?
But by all means, ongoing dialogue is what we need with town and parish councils, and that's what we'll continue. And we will start the journey with them and see where it takes us. And for some areas, it'll work absolutely perfect. And other areas, it'll be absolutely a no-go area. And because every area is very unique, but let's have those conversations to start with and see where it takes us. I think the big take from the service and from the organisation is we want to engage quite openly with town and parish councils to try and find a resolution for this.
Is it possible that when you invite towns and parish councils, that you could either CC in local councillors so that we know that invitation has gone out, and we could raise it at, say, a local parish council meeting, and perhaps we could help engage with those town and parish councils and encourage them to take the service up, perhaps?
Yeah, we can do that. I think the only thing we've got to be really mindful of is we don't want to start generating a huge industry. I get we want to have a conversation, but I don't want to then have a team of people then firing emails and monitoring what's coming in. We just got to be really careful. It's a very fine line between let's have the open dialogue and ongoing communication, than let's now generate a huge industry with feedback loops and feeding into committees and sort of everybody being copied into everything. We'd have to see what value each area brings first, and then feedback works great, perfect, then we'll follow that. But we just have to be really mindful.
I don't know if anyone else wants to speak, but I just wanted to finish off with the respect of these proposals came to engagement with our towns and parishes, and I will put my hand up. I was nervous about this particular initiative, for the garden waste, purely because I thought if we did need to stop, how would our residents feel about it? And it has made me think, should we have done it? But I am glad that we have tried it, because I think if we don't try anything, we'll never know if it works. And, you know, we've got to try things differently. And I don't think anyone else, when they took on paying for garden waste, you know, subscription in any other local authorities, as far as I know, haven't done this Saturday freighter. So I'm glad that we have done it and we've given it a trial. You know, it doesn't feel like it's going to work. It's going to go to Cabinet. We'll see what Cabinet say about it, but we'll get a good, if it is that we cease this Saturday freighter initiative, we'll make sure we get a good common plan out to make sure our residents know about this, and that there is an alternative with the 10 bins as well, which is much more flexible for our residents to use.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Hunt.
Sorry, I've got one last comment, and it is on the 10 bins. So looking at the number of visits from certain settlements further north in the district, and also looking at kind of Huntingdon, my kind of patch, it looks like there might be quite high demand for that kind of community bin scheme. If it looks like there is a legitimate need and a genuine need for more than 10 bins over a sustained period of time, and that is being used appropriately by residents and not being misused, would we consider possibly expanding the number that's being offered? The current bins that are out there, are they being used all 10 kind of frequently? Is it kind of, because we obviously want to incentivize the recycling of this waste, and if it looks like there is the demand, can we meet that, or will we be willing to possibly put additional resource?
Sorry, I think we just got to go back a little bit and understand why we did the initiatives, because these were to help our residents that were unable to pay the £57.50. So we wanted to be able to provide them with an alternative scheme. I would say. So I wouldn't want to say that if something is successful, that all in sundry goes in and starts using in 100 bins, because that's not what it's about. These initiatives are to help our areas that of parishes and towns and our residents that can't afford the £57.50.
Councillor Bywater.
Sorry, Chair, I just come up with this thought on the back of Councillor Hutt's question. So if I use Sawtry as an example, we've got 455 bin collections of drop-offs at the freighter service. If Sawtry Parish Council decide not to take up the community bins, it's their decision, not mine. If they choose, for whatever reasons, not to take it, what happens to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who are elderly people who've relied on the freighter service? What do they do with their garden waste?
Within the initiatives, we have encouraged people to compost as well, and we've got the free bins as part of the initiative as well. And there are household recycling centres which can be used.
Okay, so I get that, but ultimately, it's people who are physically able to get to the freighter service, and if they can't have community bins, then they've got nowhere to take it. Physically, they can't take it. And if I use my own green waste bin, I didn't subscribe to it. I cut a hole in the door, put some hinges on it. It's now a composting bin. I filled it up. It's filled up, and I actually have to still go to the tip to drop off. I was there this week to drop off garden waste. I haven't got a big garden, so I'm using the compost bin that's been provided. It's filled up within 12 months, less than 12 months, and I'm still physically capable to take my waste to the recycling centre. People are not going to be able to do that.
If I may, Chair, have you had any incidences of residents coming to you and asking, your help for this, because we've had this scheme going for a year. I, as a councillor, haven't had any feedback on that.
I've had a couple of people talk to me, Chair, if you'll indulge me, but we've now come through the winter months. When we had the freighter service last year, we've now had the winter months, so people have not used it because there's no need to. We're going to come into the growing season where people are going to now have that because they've not got the freighter service now. So it's all, again, we're going to be on the back foot here, aren't we? Behind the curve, so to speak.
Councillor McAdam.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation. I think Councillor Bywater's brought up a good point, actually. I was thinking to myself as we were sat here talking about this that garden waste is a very seasonable thing, very seasonal. Just as a suggestion, could we not consider carrying on with the freighters when it's really needed, like, as you said, during the growing season, just don't have it all the year round. I know we want to save money, but we do have a duty to our residents as well. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Again, when you look through the report, we did look at different options about reducing from 6 months to 3 months. We always get back to the same point, which is it's very difficult to get staff to cover the overtime on a Saturday to actually physically deliver it. So again, I appreciate it's really disappointing for some residents who's used it, and it's great to see some areas. It's really encouraging to see some areas really proactive in using the Saturday freighters. But we physically can't deliver the service consistently. So that's the big problem. And as a substitution, the suggestion is that we would then offer 10 community bins across all town and parish councils.
Councillor Bywater.
I absolutely get that. What I'm worried about here are the consequences of decision making, and it's not able-bodied people like myself. It's the vulnerable people within our community, A, who perhaps can't afford it, and B, is how do they access garden waste services if there's no community bin within that particular community? We've got a problem for some of our vulnerable residents.
I suppose one of the other things with the Saturday freighters, I think with the community bins, at least they're there and can be accessible 24 hours a day if you need them to be. Well, at least for this, and I know you're saying it might be difficult for people to access those bins, but there was still the same difficulty of being at a pre-location on a Saturday, one day in the month. I think there was, at some point, the waste will have to be taken to a location.
Sorry, Chair, I just need to drill into this because, yes, if there's something is better than nothing, that I absolutely accept that. If we haven't got community bins, then we haven't got an option, whereas at the moment, the past 12 months, vulnerable residents have had an option, and that's either to take it to the freighter service or their community bins, the 8 parish councils. If what I'm trying to get at is there doesn't seem to be any mitigation to the risk of no community bins, leaves residents really short.
Can I ask, Andy or Councillor Taylor, what feedback have you had from the parishes where you do have the freighter service at the moment, which will be stopped?
To be fair, we've had very little feedback from the parishes directly.
What I meant is, have you had any engagement with them in considering taking on the community bins so we can be assured those vulnerable residents would have somewhere to take their garden waste?
I think one of the things that we did do is we were obviously having conversations with people who are using the Saturday freighter service on a regular basis. And it didn't seem to be either people supporting vulnerable residents taking waste for them. The majority of people seemed to be using the freighter service to subsidise the need for getting an additional garden bin. So lots and lots of people were turning up with bins that had a valid subscription. And when the crews were engaging with them, a lot of it was around, well, if I use a Saturday freighter service, I don't have to get an extra bin. I can manage with just one. So it's difficult to pinpoint whether the Saturday freighter was actually doing what we intended to do in the first place to support the vulnerable. members of society. It's really difficult.
Councillor Bywater, did you want to come back in?
I don't really say much more.
No, I've understood.
Still not convinced.
Mm.
I'm still not convinced because, you know, do all our parish councils know that this freighter service is being withdrawn, the implications of that, and ultimately they may still choose not to get community bins in their villages, which is, you know, I've still not had an answer, and I'm sure people will be concerned about it.
Councillor Lowe, you had your hand up. Did you still want to come in?
Yes, please. Thank you. I was just wondering, have you looked at doing the freighter service on another day? So either early morning or sort of last thing at daytime, just for an hour or two? I'm just trying to think of, you know, what has been thought about and everything else. And I've got another question to ask that in a minute.
So the answer is when you look at the resource that we've got Monday to Friday, it is only the resource that we've got. There isn't spare vehicles and spare crews kind of lying around waiting to be utilised somewhere else. We run a really tight ship. We do run a really tight, you know, we deliver a really low unit cost for the service, really efficient service. So there isn't any spare capacity just to lie around, hence the Saturdays. And then hence the issue with trying to get people to work Saturdays. It becomes very problematic very quick.
Thank you. Then, in line with that, what's been the grey bin makeup, as it were? Have you noticed there's been a lot more green waste going into the grey bins?
I think we're starting to venture off into completely different topics, but I'm happy to take that question. To be fair, when we looked at the grey bin composition, and when you look at the grey bin composition, it's always been around about the same up to the subscriptions. Now, it was around about 40% of the grey bin was organic material, 36% of the grey bin was food waste, effectively. So when it was free, when you could mix it, people weren't. Whether that perception was that there were, actually about 9% on average was going into the garden bin. So when we went through the process, we took information and data from authorities that had actually done the transition to subscriptions. What we did find was, yes, some food or some organic waste would normally be in a green bin, if you haven't got a subscription, will migrate into the residual bin. What I will say, we've got separate weekly food waste collections coming in 2026, hopefully to try and get that out. So yes, there is a bit of behaviour change. If you haven't got a bin, somebody will put something in there that they shouldn't. What I will say is when the guys open the bin, if it's noticeable that there's a huge amount of garden waste, we'll reject it, the residual bin. We're not seeing huge numbers of extra or additional rejection bins that we would normally do.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. It was more just to come back slightly on Councillor Bywater's comments, and I appreciate the points you're trying to make. Obviously, you mentioned home composters and what have you. And obviously, the idea of the home composters is that you reuse, you compost the material and then reuse that back on your garden. So essentially, there isn't anything to dispose of. And I appreciate, obviously, that's not a one size fits all comment, and it's not applicable in all scenarios. But obviously, it's an option for residents to use.
Have we got any other comments or questions on this item? In that case, thank you so much, Andy and Councillor Taylor. Moving on to
read out the yes,
yeah. Moving out to agenda item 5, that's exclusion of the press and the public, to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting because the business to be transacted contains exempt information relating to the financial and business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. We paused. Thank you.